Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very short episode of our, I guess at this point, ongoing coverage of the Superman show. I refuse to call it by its actual name. I will just call it Superman 2023. This is episode 5. You will believe a man can lie. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. We are Uncanny Treks. Matt, are you shocked that no Superman thing that I'm aware of has ever thought of the joke, you will believe a man can lie, before?
I thought it was called "You Can Believe a Man Can Fly," just like the original Christopher Reeve Superman.
Yeah, that was the tagline for the 78 film.
Right. When I went back to look, I was like, "Oh, it was You Will Believe a Man Can Lie," and I was like, "Oh, they really got me with that one. I didn't even hear it correctly."
Yeah,
but yeah. That's really good. Really good.
It's such a good pun that it doesn't even register as a pun. It just slides
Exactly.
into the original thing.
I was impressed. Yeah, and it made sense in regards to the episode. So,
And also like the larger Superman mythos, especially like in the Silver Age, when the whole emphasis is on him deceiving and tricking Lois and Jimmy, right?
oh yeah, I mean that was his whole spiel. He was supposed to be this great human, but he was having to lie to everyone at the same time to keep himself protected. And the ones he loved protected.
I want to keep this tight so we don't have to go off on it too far, but did you have any thoughts about when Bendis had Superman come out publicly as Clark Kent a couple of years ago, or did you even read that stuff?
I didn't really read much of it. I just know that that was going to be the basis possibly for how they were going to handle Superman later on in like the films, if I remember correctly. And that had me interested because it's like, okay, so you're not going to have that Clark Kent component. It reminds me of the whole Kingdom Come thing because I don't think Clark Kent was around then. Like he had basically like retired that whole shtick.
Well, and he would have still, there would have still been elements of the Clark Kent thing, but you're right that inevitably it probably would have downplayed over time if they kept going with it, right?
Well, right, because it's such a stupid disguise. Generally, is to begin with. You know,
I maybe disagree with that slightly, but it's not worth arguing about. I will say we might look at Bendis comics at some point since we've seemed to have morphed into a comic review show, among other things. But
those episodes hadn't dropped yet, though, folks. So just wait.
That's true. That's true.
2024, 2025, here we come.
That's what everybody loves, those year-old comic reviews. Year-old comic reviews of 10-year-old comics. I mean, my quick review of the Bendis thing would be not as bad as people online say, because people online are insane, and some truly interesting ideas, but ultimately the execution wasn't really there.
I mean, it's not memorable, honestly, so I'm thinking that it must not have been that great because it didn't really stick.
I mean, I think everybody assumed that if the movies didn't pick it up, which I didn't know about that angle, but I think the general assumption was that the Clark Kent identity would be restored rather quickly. It's like the next writer, like Josh Williamson is like the next big ongoing writer on a Superman book, and he immediately resets it. Admittedly, in a very clever way.
Yeah, and I love Bendis too. I mean, some of his stuff's been really good.
Yeah, Bendis is real hit or miss with me. He's written some of my favorite comics and some of my least favorite comics, but it's certainly the online anti-Bendis brigade. They're totally unfair to him.
But he wrote Ultimate Spider-Man, correct? I'm going to make sure I get the right guy. Yeah. Ultimate Spider-Man is where I was kind of introduced to him.
Yeah, and I think you've read more of that than I have. I've only read like the first maybe 40 issues of the Peter stuff, and then I've read most of the Miles stuff, but not all the Miles stuff that Bendis wrote.
All right, Bob, so back to this episode. Let's talk a little bit about the details.
Yeah, so they have a little reference to Sub Diego, Matt. Have you ever heard of that?
No, but it sounds like Aquaman territory.
You would be right. I don't know the gimmick really well because I never read Aquaman comics, but at some point I think a part of San Diego like fell into the sea and the citizens developed, kind of spontaneous gills through something, and so Aquaman became the protector of Sub Diego.
Okay. So kind of like Lost City of Atlantis, but for America.
Yeah, I assume that was the idea. I also sort of wonder if you remember that Coast City comic we had where it's like the funeral for Coast City and like Aquaman is, I kind of wonder if the writer hadn't read that and like, oh yeah, there's more potential here.
That actually would be kind of cool. Had Coast City turned into Sub Diego, but
Can't have everything. Can't have everything. So I had no idea about most of these gang members who show up in this episode. I'm not sure if we're supposed to know them or if they're references to old villains or not, but I guess it slowly becomes apparent over the course of the episode that the ginger guy, who's sort of the main one, is the Flash villain Heatwave.
Okay. Yeah, I kept thinking of Conduit looking at
Yeah,
him.
yeah. I'm glad you said that because I did too, but forgot to put it
But
in the
it
notes.
was
Yeah.
he was just too one off for me to think it was him. Because, Conduit was supposed to be like Kenny Braverman or whatever, Clark's childhood friend slash foil.
Well, you say that, but I don't know. With the way this show rolls, I could see them doing Conduit as a one-off.
But he just seemed like a random ass character, though.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
Heatwave would be. Like, well, you got a Flash villain in a Superman show. Are we happy about the answer to the whole reason as to why they all have tech-based weaponry, Bob?
So I don't think I followed this super closely. So the government just harvested Superman's rocket ship. Is that the idea?
Yep.
Okay, I guess that also is maybe why we were thinking Conduit, right? Because I don't remember the details, but Conduit is also somehow like linked to the rocket ship, right? 'Cause
Yeah, he
he's,
touched
like,
his
in Smallville.
Yeah. At one point during it, Superman like touches the metal or something, and he has these flashbacks to Krypton or his past or the ship or I don't know what it was. Whatever happened to the people. So I'm guessing that the technology is Kryptonian and that it keeps memories, sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah, yeah. And I guess I should say, because I'm not sure if we're explaining this clearly enough for people who are watching the show but haven't like read the comics. Like Conduit was the big mystery villain immediately post Zero Hour in Superman, and he was like really built up, kind of like Hush would be like 10 years later or maybe 5 years later, about like, oh, this, this huge big boss dastardly villain with like a link to Superman's past. And then the revelation is that he was Clark's like, childhood rival slash good friend, Kenny Braverman, who, I think when he was like in womb or being born or something, had an encounter with the rocket and it mutated him.
pretty interesting villain. I'm very surprised they have not brought him back. As
Yeah,
something
I don't
more.
think he's been used much since then. And I guess like this kind of humorously enough, the story, I'm calling it the post Zero Hour story, but they'd already done the death of Superman at that point, so they were marketing it as the death of Clark Kent, right?
Correct, yes. It was the death of Clark Kent. One other thing, too, with me is they actually did make an action figure of Conduit.
I remember.
But by that, I can't really use that logic because they also made an action figure of Massacre, who only had 2 appearances. So
Oh, I thought Massacre was around a little more than that.
he had there was a back-to-back issue, and I thought that was it.
No, I don't think we read this all the way through, but the big story wasn't the big story after Death of Clark Kent, the trial of Superman.
Oh yes, was he in that?
And I think so. I think I remember like him and Superman both being like in a space prison in Trial of Superman.
Well, I stand corrected then. I'll take a look into that. I didn't even think about Massacre until I mentioned the action figure thing. I was like, oh yeah, can't really use that logic because they made some really random ass action figures of characters that did not expect them to do that.
I didn't remember that there was a Massacre action figure. The only 2 I remember are the Conduit and then the black suited Superman from Return of
Massacre
Superman.
came. Yeah, it was like a 2-pack. I don't know why I remember this. This is the kind of information that should be deleted from my brain and replaced with I don't know, professional information that would help me.
Nah. What other toys do you remember from that line? What other action figures do you remember from that
I
Superman
mean, you
line?
had all the Reign of Superman characters except for Cyborg.
Oh yeah, I guess I remember the Steel one. I don't really remember the Eradicator or the Superboy one.
You know what? There wasn't an Eradicator. I take that back. There was just Superboy and Still.
Okay.
Yeah, you probably remember all of them then.
And there wasn't a real Superman, right? There was just the Kryptonian black suit, battle suit Superman.
Oh, there was Mullet Superman.
Oh, there was a mullet Superman.
That was the issue because it was all during that time. So all these action figures were pretty much from the comics we were reading, which is why it was so freaking badass.
Yeah. Okay, so it wasn't because I remember the situation with the Batman toys for Batman the Animated Series was you couldn't get a real Batman. You could get plenty of Batmen, but they were all like Batman in like some stupid like Arctic suit, urban camouflage suit, what have you. There was no just like Batman figure.
So they had Conduit was one of them. Massacre. They had a Doomsday.
Oh
Lex
yeah.
Luthor.
Okay.
I think that was actually it for the villains. There weren't that. That was the other problem. They weren't they were really scraping the bottom of the barrel for Superman villains. They never made a Brainiac.
Well, Matt, you know how to repair that deficit in Superman villains?
How, Bob?
Superman needs to fight the Mothman.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, Jimmy, in addition to Sub Diego, references the Mothman, and I like the Mothman stories. So Superman versus Mothman would make me happy. Another little bit of trivia is that there's a bar called McGinnis, which I think is, in addition to the beer, is a shout out to the Superman Batman artist Ed McGinnis.
Yeah, this is the first time we haven't seen it as Bibbo's.
Yeah,
It's like the only bar in Metropolis.
So I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this episode, and I think you have maybe some complaints we're fixing to get to. But I do just want to say, in some ways, I think the show is starting to win me over, and especially, I still hate Deathstroke. I deeply, deeply hate Deathstroke. But I really have to shout out the choreography for the handcuff gag with Lois and Superman being handcuffed, and then the choreography of the Deathstroke Superman fight. I thought both were like excellent examples of good animation.
I agree. It's I think you heard me wrong earlier. It is good.
I thought you disliked this.
No.
Lois
I think
animation.
yeah.
Okay.
When I heard it earlier, I was like, well, I think Bob heard me wrong. Like, no, I'm fine
sorry.
with it. I think it's getting better. Like, it's getting where I want to watch the fucking show.
Oh, okay,
Sorry.
okay.
Enjoying the show too, Bob. Like, I think that I don't know. I think it's just we haven't had enough Superman animated. We haven't had an animated Superman show like this in so long that it just feels fresh. And I can get past the anime stuff because I can skip the intro. I don't have to listen to like the ending part. And I can still, like, if it gets really lame, I can look at my phone for like half a second, avoid the whole anime crap, and then look back up.
That is the nice thing about the anime style, is that it's fast-paced enough that if there is cringe, it won't be on the screen for that long.
Because there's definitely some cringe that does not apply to me, but then I always put myself in perspective and say, yeah, I'm getting close to 40, so it's not supposed to be for me anymore. But most people don't do this, though. You know that, right? Like, most people, most people are just like, oh, why is this not what I want right now? But no, this is like, I would have. I think I too would have loved this in late elementary school as a teenager. Maybe if I was like into, if animation was the thing at that time. And then it's just a good Superman show in general if you're a fan.
It's also kind of weird because it's just like, man, you'd think if Warners were competent, like, we were a little too old for the anime explosion, but the anime explosion was very much there, late 90s, early aughts.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's just like, why wasn't this show the immediate successor to Superman in the animated series in Justice League? Why did they have to literally wait for the kids in the late 90s and the early aughts who were into both anime and Superman to get old enough to make this show, right?
Because, Bob, they're the ones that are now making it. And they're making it for themselves in a sense, but also I guess that's why.
But I feel like an important part of especially like pop media, like comics and like other things, is you got to be able to figure out how to reverse engineer what the kids want,
And that's why DC Comics is going out of business.
Yeah, no, that you're right. You're right. No, that's no argument here, son. No argument here. It's amazing to me that it's conceivable that within 5 years, like, they might shut down DC Comics at Discovery, and they might just, have like Dark Horse or IDW make some DC Comics, right?
Well, yeah, or just these characters will be like Warner Brothers characters. It's just how we have characters that are Disney characters now.
Yeah, and I think they would still license them out for comics, but it's just, but it's just insane. Yeah, how like we went from 52 new ongoing comics in 2011, right, to how many regular like mainline superhero universe comics does DC publish? 15 or 20 now.
Yeah, and everything's either Superman or Batman.
Yep. Although they're trying to get better about that with Dawn of DC. Not always successfully, but they're trying to diversify it a little bit with Dawn of DC, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I'm getting very disappointed by my weekly pirated list, Bob. I need to work on this.
Yeah, same. So, speaking of complaints, Matt, I will say that the general, who I assume at this point is probably Sam Lane, calling Amanda Waller Mandy feels really, really wrong. I'm not sure if that's like supposed to be like a sign of disrespect from him, or if it's supposed to be like, like the way we have like Ronnie Troop we're gonna have Mandy Waller. We're rebranding the names of the characters a little bit.
Yeah, please call her Amanda Waller. Mandy Waller's just, ugh, I don't care for that. And then I'm thinking this episode pretty much all but confirmed it's Sam Lane. That's who that guy was. Remember, we were kind of not sure at first, but
because we didn't see very much of him the first time, right?
Yeah, and I think this is just going to lead to some daddy-daughter drama now that Lois knows Clark is Superman.
On the one hand, it makes perfect sense because, like, Lois's hatred of secrecy, like, it's a very sort of, like, Oedipal thing, right? It's a very sort of rejecting what her dad does thing. On the other hand, I do think it maybe is going to feel a little forced. I mean, we'll see how they handle it, but just, like, the drama between Lois and Clark in this works pretty well. I don't know if it's actually going to be benefited by adding, like, Sam Lane as an outside factor. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't think we've seen this before in animation, like anything with Sam Lane where he's this prominent.
I'm sure he's in one of the DC movies or a couple of the DC movies they've been putting out the past 15 years, but I couldn't say for sure.
I mean, it's an interesting take too. Then you have, he's apparently over Waller,
Project X or Suicide
X,
Squad,
whatever they want to call it.
Sorry, Task Force X. My bad.
Which is, I mean, a little different from what we've seen before in the comics.
Yeah,
in the other 14 iterations of the Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
I mean, we have a damn video game coming out soon, Bob. It's called Suicide Kills the Justice League or something.
Yeah, it's a pretty good title.
Yeah, and I'm like, that'll be a cool video game. But Jesus, like, I have seen more Suicide Squad in the last 10 years than I think anything else.
Well, it's also unfortunate because, like, the movies are pretty good. I like the movies okay, but I don't think that there has ever been a good Suicide Squad comic except for the original one in the late 80s, early 90s. I think every other Suicide Squad comic has sucked.
I read, the first couple of arcs of the original, and it was, I don't know, if you haven't read it, pick it up and give it a shot, because compared to the stuff like you see in the New 52,
yeah,
or even DC Rebirth,
it was a new idea at the time. And it was like taking some tropes from action movies, but also like taking the B and C list villains. And it was really good writing. Yeah, it's John Ostrander and his then wife, Ken Yale, and then Luke McDonnell on the art. It's really good. I've read all like 66 issues. I love that series. But partly through imitation, partly through just, I think, some good writers have tried the Suicide Squad since, but they haven't done their best work, I think. It's just never felt as good as it did from the late 80s to the early 90s.
Well, it's sort of like X-Men. It's the combination of the characters you have on the team, so that can also be a weakness.
Yeah. So one other thing to kind of bring up here. So you're finding the Lois and Clark drama pretty satisfying then?
I'm fine with it now, yeah. Since he's already been exposed to Superman, I'm like, okay, we're past all that, in episode 5. Yes, this is good.
Yeah.
We're not going to draw this out for the next 2 seasons.
So I was shocked on when I went on Twitter on Friday. Like, I didn't necessarily expect this, how much debate there was about, like, oh, is Lois the asshole or is Clark the asshole? And how, like, gendered it seemed to be about who took what side. I just thought it was, like, really weird, man. I was just like, it's just good drama. Why do you have to pick a side? And it made me, well, and I kind of wanted to get your take on that first.
Okay, so that's just the new way of watching television, I think. You're either with us or against us. I don't care. I just want to be entertained.
Yeah.
That's about it. When I watch a show, I just, yeah.
Yeah,
Unless it's reality. Now, if it's reality TV, I will take a side. But if it's just a regular television show, I'm just like, okay, well, that was written in the script.
Reality TV are like game shows, so it like makes sense to like quote take a side. Right?
Yeah, exactly. You're really rooting for people, especially. But with a narrative piece like this, it's written in the script that way. And it makes sense. Lois should be kind of pissed. He did lie to her.
Yeah. And but also Clark's perspective makes sense. He's like literally known her for like, even though he's into her, he's only known her for what, like a month at most at this point. And she's also like super aggro about Superman. Like, why would he tell her?
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, but it adds the drama. I don't really think I need to pick a side, one or the other.
Yeah, and both characters are right, which is
Yeah.
good, that's good drama. Like that's Hegel and Aristotle's definition of tragedy usually is that you have two competing valid claims collide, right?
As I've gotten older, there's this song, but it goes, "There ain't no good guys, there ain't no bad guys. There's only you and me, and we just disagree. That's all it is." Like, it's really all it is.
Matt's aged and found the wisdom of country music.
Why attack it?
And I think in some ways too, it's like the logical extension of like stan culture that social media has kind of accelerated, and also like if you feel strong identification with a character, then you're more likely, obviously, to have a very aggro response to characters who are in their way in the narrative.
But if you are listening to our podcast, folks, and our Strange New Worlds coverage, I'm going to start reading a couple of comments from Facebook people just to get Bob's opinions.
Oh,
so,
God.
So be sure to check that out, because we do like to read up on what people are thinking about this, and what the Twitter feed is below. What is it called now, Bob? It's not even Twitter. It's X now. I deleted mine, by the way. I didn't delete. I didn't delete the account, but I deleted the app off my phone because I just got tired of.
I'm torn. Like I want to get off. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. I want to get off Twitter because it now looks like a porn tab in my browser.
I didn't even think that. I didn't even get that into consideration.
But
neither did Elon Musk.
I don't have a Blue Sky account yet because I'm a loser, and there is a part of me that's like, you go where the people are, and even though like I think a lot of like interesting accounts have gone over to Blue Sky, my sense is that the vast number of users are still on Twitter. That definitely may change. It honestly at this point it just does seem like Elon Musk is literally trying to run Twitter into the ground, but I don't know.
The only things I'm really on that I would consider maybe doing something would be Discord. But what we'd have to do is create a Discord and get like people who we just have to like post it on Twitter and be like, "Hey, we're moving to Discord. If you want to join, here's the link," or something like that.
Yeah.
Or, I feel like we would get the niche audience that we're looking for, because we're very niche.
We are.
Niche. Is that the right word? Niche, whatever.
Niche or niche, I think is fine.
Yeah, but I don't think that it would take some advertising on our part to get the people to just join up and be like, "Hey,
So the other thing, and Matt, this is the way I think Elon Musk could save Twitter.com. This is a very controversial proposal, but I think it has merit. And it was inspired by scrolling all of these like anti-Clark or anti-Lois tweets on the Adventures of Superman hashtag. And the idea is, what if you were required to show your age on your social media postings? I think that would be really good, because like if these people tweeting this are like in their teens or their early 20s, it would make me a lot more forgiving of their take, and it would also really reduce the aggressivity I feel to make fun of them. But if they're late 20s or up, I want to go after them mercilessly.
And see, that too is the big issue, because you can't make that happen, because everyone's always going to get around it. It doesn't. I mean, it was like that. It started with porn sites. Oh, you have to be over 18. Okay.
Well, I'm not saying they have.
Let me do some math. I mean, that was the time math came in handy to figure out how many years you had to be ahead.
I'm not saying they have to be over 18 to post. I'm just saying it would be much healthier for my psychology if I knew how old the people posting this was, and I could adjust my judgment of the post appropriately.
Oh, I would love it too, but it's just never going to happen.
Yeah,
because
I
I want to say that they have you have to be at least 13 to have a Twitter. So then you're at least dealing with. But even then, I don't want to interact with teenagers.
Let the kids be the kids. I'm not trying to bully. I'm not trying to bully a teenager or a early.
But I feel like that would probably happen, and that also set up a red flag, because then you would know you're talking to like a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old. Get Jared from Subway in there.
well, I mean, I know this wouldn't go this way for everybody, but it's like if I knew I was digitally interacting with a 17-year-old, I would just immediately stop.
Exactly. When I read postings on Reddit or on Twitter, like sometimes I think they're just trolling, but then other times I can kind of pick up on stuff and be like, wait a minute, this kid's really upset because they spent all their allowance money on this video game, and that's why they hate it. Not because,
Oh man, yeah,
not because
yeah,
it's that bad.
yeah. That makes sense.
You just
Which
kind of
also,
pick up on things.
I don't spend much time on Reddit, and I always thought the convention of like the sort of like me parentheses like 27 comma m close parentheses my boyfriend parentheses 26 comma m close parentheses. I always thought that convention was weird, but I'm now seeing the virtue to it, right?
Oh yeah, it's it has to happen. They
Yeah.
quickly adapted to make it to where you could communicate easily on Reddit if you want to avoid talking to people that are psycho, or if you want to just to like entertain yourself.
All right,
But that's
so
the internet
yeah,
in a nutshell, guys.
but I do just want to like demographically understand like where these weird responses to things like Star Trek Prodigy or to Superman, My Adventures with Superman. It would be really interesting if you could like demographically kind of know where this is coming from when you're reading it on social media.
Yeah, I would love that. You need to come up with a way to figure that out, Bob. And we also
All
need to
right,
make
Matt.
sure we can find a way to sell them ads that are appropriate for their age demographic.
Yes, yes. Or maybe we could just move to a more kind of public utilities model of social media where it wasn't inundated with ads. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Shut up, socialist.
Yeah, I know. How dare I have schemes to make life slightly more pleasant and easier for everyone? All right, so to tease the next episode, turns out maybe Gorilla City's in the woods, Matt? Maybe?
Yeah, what's up with that? They just randomly you have this giant ass gorilla meeting up with Jimmy in the Metropolis woods. I mean, I didn't catch where he was specifically going with this group, but
I don't think they really stressed it. Although, I mean, if Metropolis is anything like Hipsterville, Seattle, they do have some buses during the summer that will take you to trailheads for hiking.
there you go. That's probably what it was. Did you kind of think though, Bob, at the end of the episode that Lois and Clark were going to end up in the woods with the camp like already set up? And Jimmy's like, "Gee golly, how'd you guys get here so quick?" Something like that. I felt that coming at some point. Like they weren't just going to forget about him.
I think it could have been a really good gag, but I also think given like where we are in the season and the tone of both like Jimmy realizing that Lois and Clark don't think about him at all and Lois and Clark kind of falling out over all this stuff, I just don't think it would have fit like the kind of emotional beats of the narrative.
Just wasn't appropriate. But man, I thought it was going to happen.
All right, Matt. Well, this has been longer than we intended, but we had interesting meditations on student figures and social media. We'll see how much survives. This has been Uncanny Trek's coverage of Superman 2023, Episode 5. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks for listening.